Hello and welcome to the impzonepod podcast. We are back again to talk more TNA wrestling shenanigans. And well, I want to not piggyback, but I want to discuss something that was said recently in an interview by the Hardys. Now this interview online, you can find it pretty easily out there. So since I'm discussing it so much, this was Matt and Jeff having a discussion with TMZ inside the ring. And mostly the Hardys were talking about various different things, but they did drop one little statement basically saying that potentially that the match with Team 3D could be their retirement match. Now, from what we know, or what we've kind of heard for a while, is that the Hardys wanted to retire in WWE. And we've heard that Jeff wants to have his last match against Roman Reigns, which I don't know, that doesn't make a whole lot of dollars and cents, because in my mind, if you have your last singles match with him, okay, sure, cool, whatever. However, I think that they should retire as a team. They should retire together as a team. And I think a lot of people want to see them in the Motor City Machine Guns, but I don't know how many. Like, honestly, I'd want to see that, but in some regards. But yeah, I said this before. It's like it's an old school fantasy match, and I don't think that the match today would live up. I think the Guns could deliver, but I don't think as much the Hardys could. So I don't know about that. But still, the idea that they're like, even if their TNA careers are kind of over, that means that they will be vacating the belts at that time. Now, I usually would say that, they've earned retirement or whatever else. They're legends, they're icons, whatever, all that sort of stuff. The thing of it is, you can't say, they haven't given enough to the business or whatever else, anything like that. So I don't think it's so selfish for them to retire with the belts, but I do feel like, bro, you need to, put somebody over on the way out. I really feel that is something that you should do, because, this is the business. This is what a lot of people did for a lot of other people for many years. When they're on the way out, or when they're on the way, to retirement, they're putting other people over. And again, we turn around and say, this is nothing personal or whatever, blah, 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 against them or whatnot. This is just saying, well, what are we going to do when they retire, or when they leave, or what? Like, it's been said for a while that their contract is up around Bound for Glory. So we know that is pretty much their last date, or last dates with TNA, or roughly speaking, at least. Maybe they will sign another deal, but it's clear they're looking to retire, and they know that they can't go at the same level that they used to go. And if they want to have a last little run and retire, that's all cool. I hope that it works out really well for them and they can do that. But the thing is, if we're looking at TNA and looking at tag teams and looking at, getting as many of these younger wrestlers over to help them draw into the next few years, they've got to put over some of these young teams. They have got to do that. They cannot, just leave at the end of this title run, whenever that is. And how are they going to lose those belts and that sort of thing? They're not going to lose them to Team 3D, because they're not probably wrestling ever again. So I think I've said a few of that sort of stuff before, but this is where we're at. We've really got to clamp it down and say, okay, well, are you staying or aren't you staying? Are you retiring or aren't you retiring? Like at the end of the day, we need, like, if we don't take these, somebody doesn't pin you or make you submit for these belts, how are these young guys going to get over? They need to have been believed upon in, you know what I mean? Like, people need to think, oh yeah, this new team, they're as great as the Hardys because they just beat the Hardys. Not, oh shit, they're really bad because they couldn't even beat the Hardys who are, old timers and whatever else and all of this sort of stuff. So, yeah, that's where you need to be at. You need to be at saying, how do we get somebody, and maybe even more than one somebody, over from being, these guys are going to leave, these guys are going to retire, or whatever it is, the situation. So you've got to think like, okay, how do we get... No, it's not hard. It's not hard for somebody to beat them, in my opinion. But it is hard to say, how do we work this out? How do we make these... Like, because I think before, like, back in... I think, was it 2017, 2016? Whenever it was that they left before, they held the tag team titles. And then they left the company, and they vacated the belts, effectively. There was a lot more in that. There was a lot more deals and shenanigans and whatnot going on behind the scenes. And I don't... Like, it's like the MVP... what are they called in AEW now? The Hurt Syndicate, or whatever they're called now. It's a much like that. It feels like, it's not like them saying, no, we're not going to put anyone over, but it is them saying in some ways, well, we're not going to put anyone over, because, like, at least at that time, they didn't. At this time, I don't know, but it certainly feels like, well, we'd rather retire with the belts or whatever type thing. Or we'd rather not try to put in so much effort or whatever it is, or really save ourselves for the last few big matches that we've got left in us. Which, yeah, I get that. That's fair enough. But again, you can't just leave. Like, you left before without putting people over. And, like, I think that has happened here and there and whatnot as well. But still, it's something that shouldn't happen. Because, again, where is the tag team scene going to be in TNA, not just without the Hardys, but without somebody have beaten the Hardys and saying, no, we beat the Hardys, oh, but we also beat the Hardys, like type thing. If you have First Class or Order 4 or somebody beat the Hardys and win those tag team titles, and then you have... Well, like the Rascals against the Hardys one last time or whatever it is, but the Rascals win, and then they go on to face First Class. It's like, well, Matt and Jeff have done their thing. They're out of here. They're gone. Like, obviously, it's not that easy, but making those that's the decision that needs to happen, in my opinion. You need to figure out, okay, who are we going to put these belts on? Okay, cool. And then we're going to have you guys lose like a number one contendership, or you're going to lose a random match on TV or something to these guys, and then that's going to be it for you guys, or whatever. Maybe on pay-per-view, but whatever. That's what you've got to give. That, or you've got to give them one more big time match on pay-per-view against whoever beats them, and then be like, no, we've got to win, we've got to have another last chance or whatever, whatever it is, but then they lose and it's like, okay, they're gone. Obviously people don't want to see them go or whatever and all of that, but the thing is, they're going to go one way or the other. And there's a lot of people, a lot of tag teams that I'm sure they want to wrestle. Edge and Christian do come to mind, but I don't know what's going on there with them, and we don't know their contractual situations. Um, and it's also very not funny, but it's very odd. I said this before that WWE doesn't want this like Hardy's Team 3D match. Perhaps they're on the mindset of like, well, it's probably not going to deliver to the level that we want it to deliver, so let's not bother doing it. I don't know. That might be their perspective. But yeah, no, I think that, again, if you're not going to, like Gail Kim did this a few years ago, but it kind of it kind of set the stage for a lot of things, you know? So you've got to have a set stage for things. You've got to have somebody having that rivalry with you and having somebody like that's your mentee in some ways kind of going against each other now that you've kind of passed the baton, so to speak. Um, so that's kind of what you need. You can't you can't like decide, oh yeah, you know, at the last minute. You need to realize, oh yeah, this is where we're at. We've got to figure out how we're going to get these belts off of them. And like I said before, I don't know how you're going to do the not the quarter shot gauntlet from now on. Like I really think like the quarter shot needs to be divided up. It needs to be men and women's ones. Maybe you like whittle it down to 10 or something. I don't know. Or maybe you just say, oh, instead of you get to quarter shot whenever, it's just a gauntlet that determines the number one contender or something. And again, like I said before, they shouldn't just have it on Bound for Glory. They should have that, be like Victory Road or whatever. Whereas now, right now, you kind of can feel like maybe, like, obviously you could think about saying, let's take the tag titles off of them before that. I said that before, but as I said, I don't know I don't know whether it was, but at some point it was like, well, like if you're going to have another tag team match on that show, like you've got to defend those tag titles. And especially on a big show like that, you've got to have something. But yeah, like if you're going to have that, it's going to be like, well, that's going to pale, well, not pale in the ring perhaps, but pale in comparison to the star power of, Hardy's versus Team 3D. Again, you've got to give these teams star power by beating other, well-established teams. Team 3D, they're never going to wrestle again, pretty much. So you're never going to get anything more off of them, basically. So again, that's another reason why I said that this was like, it's a bad idea in some ways. It's like, yes, it's probably the biggest match that you could do, but it's like, one of those things where now you're overly reliant on it kind of thing in some ways. Like now, especially now you've said, hey, this is what's going to happen. Now you've kind of locked people into going, oh yeah, well, they're not losing those belts until then, are they? And then it's like, again, the thought of saying, well, their contracts are up around that time. So they'll obviously, like, again, that makes sense, makes dollars, saying, hey, we're looking to retire, we're looking to leave. And it's tough. It's a tough situation. And I get that, but it's like they've got to say, you've got to drop these belts, guys. You've got to drop these belts. Whether that's on TV or how that is or where that is, I don't think many people care that much. But if you're going to do it, like in many ways, like again, you shouldn't just, well, in some ways you could just do it and not really a lot of build up, but you kind of want to build it up because you want people to feel like, oh shit, like what's going to happen. But then again, you might want to feel like the build up is for their rematch type thing. But then again, people's like perception of like well, why would they lose the belts now, like, type thing. So even if you put the belts on somebody and you built it up for the rest of the month or whatever it was, or even like a few months, which is like going to be really tough, as I sort of said, how are you going to make it believable or whatever else that the Hardys are actually going, like, in some ways they might win, but they're not going to. You know, they're going to walk off into the sunset and, you know, go to WWE, you know, and without people knowing, oh yeah, that they've been in talks with WWE. So people are going to know that they've been in talks with WWE because they're probably already in talks with WWE. So at least there is some talks with WWE, obviously, because they've already gone to NXT and done stuff. And like they should, like in some ways, they should go even more. But still, like I think this is like we've said this before, like NXT, or at least the TV station that NXT is on, is now acting as that vehicle, like a lot for what TNA is doing. So they're not reliant on it, but they're starting to rely on it, seemingly, so to say, hey, well, we'll be on here soon anyway, type thing. So that's kind of giving the game away in some ways, like saying, oh yeah, well, we'll be here, or we'll be on this level at least. So again, people can get into that, and it'll be something for them to see where they're at. But yeah, no, like certainly, as I said, the like we've got to wait to, like, I think, like, again, like you're thinking like Bound for Glory, like as I said before, the Thursday after that, I think like that is potentially probably going to be a live episode of TNA. So there's many reasons for that. Like, so you might feel like, let's put on as big of a show as what we can as well, since it's a live show. You could have the Hardys being like, you know, coming out for that live episode and being like, we've done everything, but we're here to retire, or we're here to vacate the belts. But somebody comes out to interrupt them, or whatever, and then beats them and whatever, and in a match, and then they take the titles. You know, I don't know whether that works as well, because it's like, you know, you might say, oh well, they were going to retire, but now, like, what's their like their motivation is like revenge, or their motivation is something else, or like, how dare you take that moment away from us, or whatever. I don't know. Like, that could be something to say, hey, well, let's get to that point, you know. And again, like, you're probably going to have, like, in my opinion, again, the celebration of whomever wins the world title, because I feel like that's the time to, like, Slammiversary could have been the time to do it. I still feel like, you know, some people will agree to disagree or whatever. I don't know who the right person is. Like, a lot of people have been saying, like, you know, Santana, you know. So I still think there's a lot of momentum behind Santana. But you've got to realize, again, you know, I'm not just saying it. People know this. Joe Hendry is like TNA's biggest star, so you've got to do something with him. Like, you know, what are you going to do with him? I don't know. It'd be cool to see something. And like Elijah, who's out right now, it's like, well, he's a big time star, and I think they kind of wanted to do something with Hendry and Elijah. So, but still, like, like when you're thinking like forward future of the company, you know, again, same thing. You've got to build other people. You've got to find ways to, you know, get these other guys over. And like they just did this with Kazarian the other day, like giving him the win so that he can face Macklin at some point. So, and I wouldn't mind seeing Macklin and take the belt off Trick, but I don't know, like, what else are you going to kind of do with Macklin too. So, you've got to start thinking like, well, if he vacates that belt, what are you going to do with that? Or what, like, yeah. So, but yeah, guys, there's a few different like things going on with like changing of the guard, so to speak, in some ways, and all of that sort of stuff. So it's interesting to start thinking about like, where are we at? How do we get, like, how do you get, this to work out, or how does it, come together? Because again, like, do you have that retirement or from the Hardys or whatever it is? It's a little bit like tough to say, because I always think, like, as I said, the somewhat old school way. And if somebody's not getting over, or, whatever, it's like going to be like, oh, okay, well, none of one in this tag team division could beat the old head Hardys, and they're just going to go to WWE now, I don't know. It just doesn't sound good. It sounds like a raw deal in many ways, so, but yeah. I don't know, guys. I am still sort of thinking how they can, like, pull it off, so to speak, more so, I guess. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see, I suppose, and hope for the best, I think, because again, like, not that the tag team division is such a big draw to the company, but it, like, obviously the Hardys are, but that's the problem. In some ways you need to treat every division like it matters, because that's how everything matters. If one thing is not less important, but if nothing really matters, it's like, well, like, why are you wasting my time then? Like, you're wasting my time by showcasing me this match or this feud or whatever else it is, if you don't care about that particular title or that particular feud, or you don't give it enough time, or you don't give it enough energy, or whatever else it is. It's like, well, why have I sat here to pay my ticket? Yes, you've got your great main eventers, but you haven't got a good tag team division. You haven't got a good, mid-card singles division. And you haven't got a good, like, quote-unquote, cruiserweight Super Juniors division, or whatever else it is. You haven't got a good women's division. Like, every division needs to be strong, so that you can go every single match on this show, or every single feud on this show, or every single thing on this show has a lot behind it. You're like sitting there and going and getting invested in everything, not just going, oh yeah, whatever, this match, whatever, it's a match, whatever, blah blah blah, I don't really care. The only thing that's been invested in has been the main event, so that's the only thing to care about, because nothing else has, relevancy or energy or effort put into it. So you can't forget that that's, what you're selling people. You're selling people that, this matters, and you should care, and you should, yeah, I don't know how else to put it, but yeah, those are the things. So that is where we're at. Hope you guys have enjoyed this episode, because it's, yeah, yeah, and I hope you guys will join me again in another one.